Hi guys, so Don Rice here, and we're looking at the Don Smith B24. I started doing up wiring bundles. This is one of the engine nacelles, and you can see down in here, this is the end of the servo connection, and then that's connected to a servo extension, which goes into this area here, and there's a tube that comes down and ends in there, and then another tube that starts there and comes all the way to the center section on the other side of the wing, and looks like that. And so they had all these extensions. They, being the original builder, had put in all these extensions, which I don't know, made me kind of nervous. Not really sure what the lineage of these extensions are. They don't look bad, to be honest with you. I just prefer using my own wires. I know where it came from, and I know the crimps are good, and because I'm going to make every crimp. So this is a new connector I just put on tonight. This is new wire. Got this from Servo City, and this has been run into the tubes and an end. This is also new wire. This is for the flap servo. This is new wire that is for the number 3 engine right here. And then up at the top, that's some new wire also that's wired up for the left aileron. So there's essentially four servos in each half of the wing, and so far what I've got is I've gotten 4 wires run. They're coming out here. I will run I will connect all this stuff up to Ashlock connectors. I'll show you that later. You can see that this is just the old wires sticking out of the right side of the wing. That's for the flap and the ailerons, and here you can see throttle servos and stuff like that. So ripping out the old stuff, putting in new stuff. So I'll bring you back in a little bit. Alright, so I wanted to show you some of the tools required here. I just use some basic strippers like this. Occasionally you need a knife. It's got a sharp connector in there. Some nice tweezers. This is the crimping tool that I use. I've done a tutorial on how to do these kind of crimp connections on RC Scale Builder before, so I won't go into that. A good pair of side cutters, and I use servo connectors from Airwild. I've also got bulk connectors from a few different companies. These are the Ashlock connectors. I'll get into that more later once I get a couple of them wired up. And so anyway, set up a table, make a big mess, lots of wire. It's all heavy gauge. It's all 20 gauge or 22 at the lightest. And I'm just wiring. It's what I'm doing. Later. Okay guys, so a few minutes have passed, like 24 hours worth, and this is the one of the aileron servo connections, and coming out of the end of the wing, it'll plug into a similar thing that's in the outboard wing. This is number 4 engine throttle. I put tape over the connectors, make sure they don't come undone. Here's a little foam keeper. I get these from DreamWorks, and the wire runs down here, and there's a this tube right here. You can just see a little bit of it, right? So this tube brings the wires from the outboard wing, the aileron, and the throttle we were just looking at. That tube comes up here into this aileron servo bay, similar to this aileron servo bay. I'm sorry, these are flap servo bays. And essentially all 4 servo wires come into this flap bay, into the servo bay, and they're coming out of this little tube. It would have been nice if this tube was a little larger in diameter, because I can tell you straight up, it's a pain in the ass to get 4 wires to feed into this tube, because I don't have clear access to the other end of this tube. The other end of this tube is buried in the wing, so you know, you got to think way in advance when you're building these friggin' airplanes to make sure that you've got enough tube for all the wires, and you might have airlines. And oh, by the way, there are supposed to be airlines, but they're not going in that tube. Honestly, have no idea where they're going to go, but I'm gonna have to figure that out pretty soon. Anyway, so here's a flap servo. Here's the other throttle connection. One of these wires comes out and then goes up this way, and through that hole you can just see some daylight. It'll go underneath the retract mechanism here, snakes up in that way, and that goes to the number 2 engine. So I essentially have all of the servos wired in at this point when you look at the bottom of the wing. However, when you look at the top of the wing, yeah, still got a little work to do. Back later. Okay, so when I was just talking to you, I was talking about the airlines, and there's no room in the tube for airlines. Well, yeah, the truth is I've got to try. Because if I don't get the airlines into that tube, well, I don't know how I'm going to get the airlines out to the retracts. I should have put the airlines in earlier. This is another one of those planning ahead things. You got to be 27 steps ahead. So what I've done here is this particular wire. This is the flap wire, which is the shortest of the wires, and it's the one that's terminated in that flap servo bay. All the others go through the servo bay and head off somewhere else. I have now taped, hopefully very securely, I have taped some two airlines and a string, and I'm going to pull this whole thing through, and hopefully all 4 pieces come through. The airline will come through and it'll stay, and then I'll have the wrong end of my servo wire in the servo bay, and that's why I'm pulling a string through, because I'll then tie the string back to the servo wire and pull it back through. So so here we go. Okay, well, let's give this a shot. I'm going to tip this up. Dropping the wing at this point would be in bad form. Corsair's in the way. Stupid Corsairs. Alright, let's see if we can get this up. Alright, so here's the flap bay. Here's the servo wire I'm going to be yanking on. Here are all the wires I do not want to be a problem. So I'm going to try and make sure that they stay out of the way. Alright, now I'm going to pull on this. And so at this point, this mess here is going to feed in, and what you will never be able to see is the fact that the tube into which all this stuff is going is actually against the bottom skin, which means that it's 2 or 3 inches away from you know, where I can get to easily. Alright, so I'm going to pull just kind of gently. The last thing I want to have happen is for this servo wire right here to pull through with nothing attached to it, because then not only will I have failed in the task of trying to get the airlines out here, I will have also managed to undo the successful insertion of this one servo wire. So that would be catastrophically bad. Actually, this is going in much easier than I expected. I'm pulling a couple inches at a time with my right hand over here and stopping, and then I'm feeding some slack in over here to be taken up with the next little pull. And it's moving, so that's good. It's also getting a little harder to pull, which is scary. There it is. There it is. I got it. Oh, and I have the string. Yay! And I'm beating the hell out of the Corsair at the same time. So it's all good, because I hate that stupid airplane. Alright. Move this back into place. Okay. Woohoo! So what we have here is my flap servo wire, which I'm going to pull back that way. Oh, yay. Okay, and the string is here. It's good. And airline. Woohoo! Alright, so okay, so geez, I was a Boy Scout and I still suck at knots. So, but you know, you gotta try. I know that's not the right kind of knot. I need the kind of knot that as I pull on it, it gets tighter and tighter, and I don't know what that knot is. Okay, like that, and tape, because tape solves all problems. Everybody knows that. Don't try and pretend that that's not true. Usually it's duct tape that solves all problems, but I don't need to solve a 200-mile-an-hour problem. I just need to keep the string from coming off during this pull. Right? Right. So, there we go. Alright, string over here. Oh, you can't see anymore. I've changed your perspective. Haha. Okay, hold on. Okay, so here's string. I don't know if you can see that or not. Don't really care. And I'm going to pull this back into that tiny tube. That's a 1/2-inch diameter tube. Seriously, should have been a bigger tube. You gotta see if it's coming out here. It suddenly got very hard to pull, and that's always scary. So, need to... Yep, it is coming out. Okay, yay. Sometimes it's easier to use force multiplier. In this case, some 6-inch hemostats. Get in there. There it is. And yank that right out. Okay, well, so I'm going to call that getting lucky, because now I've got airline, and all the wires are still in this wing, so it's all good. Righteous. Later. Alright, so I know that this particular video is about the wiring harnesses and such, but so since you saw me pull the airlines, I just thought I'd show how I kind of do this stuff. So a couple of good quality tees, which I also get from DreamWorks. I get a lot of this kind of stuff from DreamWorks. They do a lot of business in the jet industry, and the jet guys tend to use stuff that's good. And I believe we should all be using the best stuff we can, because, you know, talking about a $10,000 airplane here, you hate to see something fail, you know, that you spent 50 cents on, where you could have spent $1.50 and not had it fail. Anyway, I've got a reasonably long extension here because when we're done, this wing is going to be by far the heaviest part of the airplane. It's got huge retracts and wheels in it. It's got at least 8 servos, 4 engines, 4 electronic ignition systems, 4 battery packs. It's probably going to weigh 40 pounds. And so somebody's going to be holding on to this, and we want to be able to very quickly get it connected and dropped onto the fuselage. So I use these. These are the Robart number 190 quick disconnects. I've never had one fail, to be honest with you. But one of the reasons I think that I've never had one fail is I use this stuff. This is I get this from BVM. Actually, I think I buy it from DreamWorks, but it's BVM retract lube. And at some point, I will be injecting some of this into each of the wing cylinders. But putting it in the wing cylinders doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to find its way onto this O-ring. And so it's this O-ring that I'm concerning myself with right now. So I like to put a little bit of lube on there and just move it around with a small, this is a very densely packed kind of a Q-tip, so it doesn't leave a lot of lint behind. Lint and dirt and all that kind of stuff is bad. So there you go. I don't know if you can see it, but it's nicely lubed up. And I always store these things together. So at the end of the day, you disconnect your airplane, connect these back together. There's an additional pair just like this on inside the fuselage. You connect those together and you're done. Alright, so at this point, all of the airlines in the wing are now complete. And so I should tell you that on the other side, there's an additional pair of these quick disconnects at the other end of this wire down there in the wheel well, and another set that are on the actual retract mechanisms. That's so that when you need to pull the retracts out of the airplane, they've got a nice quick disconnect on them, and you can just bang, you know, in just a second, loosen them up rather than have to try and yank airlines off of your retracts. All right, that's all for right now. Alright, so one of the things I do is I like to, you know, I'm sure everybody does the same thing, so there's probably nothing new going on here, but just organize the wires and get them laid out to where, you know, they're not all tangled up. And then I'll just kind of lightly, I'm not tugging on them, I'm just trying to hold them vertically, and what I'll do is, whichever one is the shortest one, that's the one that guides the length cutting of the rest of them. And so I'll make sure that they are all essentially the same length, like that. And before I start, you know, stripping and crimping. Alright, so you remember I was talking earlier about planning. And so part of what I'm doing here is I'm kind of planning out how I ultimately want this to look when it's all said and done. And these particular wires, the nice clean red, white, black wires, these are the throttle wires, and I'm going to put all of those into a single connector. These are Molex connectors. Many of you may know them as Ashlock, but Ashlock is just a renamed one of many different Molex type of connectors. And so and I've got these labeled, you know, 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the engine numbers. And so that's the first one I'm going to wire up. All 4 of those go into a single connector, and this is one of the 12-pin Ashlocks. And so the intention here is that I will put this connector onto the throttle servos, and this will be the mating connector that will ultimately have the wires that plug into the receiver that are in the fuselage. And then these two, you know, plug together. You couldn't plan that. They don't have. Do I have a? What do I got? 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Because that's a 9-pin connector. Ah, dumbass. Well, I've always said that if you're going to screw up, the sooner you realize it, the sooner you can fix it, the easier it's going to be. So, we'll try this again. So these are the male and female side of an ashlock pair. And they just slip together like that. And 4 servos are suddenly connected. Bing, bang, boom. And they lock together. They are made for high vibe environments. I've used these in my professional job for decades, literally. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that a company like Ashlock comes along and starts marketing them to the RC world. This is a great product. I'm glad everybody has access to these now. But here's the thing. I want to make all the throttle servos will go into, in the wing, will go into this, which is we'll have male pins sticking into here. And all the other servos, the flaps and the ailerons, I will change the sex up and put those into this particular one. That way, when there's some guy hanging on this 40-pound airplane, there's going to be a couple of quick disconnect airlines, and there will be 2 wire cables dangling down from the wing, and you could plug them in together like that, and then that would be stupid because that won't work. But there will be a similar 2 plugs coming out of the fuselage. They only mate one way. You cannot mess this up, which is what makes this such a beautiful thing. So these are the crimp pins that get used on, I don't know if you can see them, I don't know if we are properly focusing or not, but these are the male pins that go into the larger connector. I've got 12 of them here. I have extras, but hopefully I don't need them. These are the female pins. These go into the smaller connector. So I'm about to start stripping. Alright, so it comes to stripping, and I'm not going to do a full tutorial here, but as long as I've got to do it anyway, you know, I take 1/8 of an inch off of each of these. As you can see, it's a highly calibrated 1/8 of an inch. You know, give or take 30 thousandths maybe. And I'll just strip all 12 wires at once. Like that, and I like to make sure that it's nice and twisted. This is good copper wire. Like I said, I get this from Servo City. I think I've also bought, I think some of this stuff, you can tell it's different colors, so I get it from different vendors sometimes from Thunderbolt RC. Sometimes I get some when I'm up at the AMA convention. So this particular crimper, you're not going to buy this crimper, and I wouldn't recommend that you even try to. It's just one I've had for, geez, I don't know, 30 years. You can buy crimpers from, I think it's like Thunderbolt RC that sells the Ashlock connectors, and they sell a crimper for these pins as well. And honestly, I haven't used it. I don't know if it's easier or less easy to use than this one. I'm just used to this one. I know how it works, and like I said, I'm not going to go into a whole tutorial on making these crimps. There's each of these pins has two little crimp zones. I don't even think I can show it to you. It's such a small thing, but towards the end of it, there are longer tangs. That's so they can wrap around the insulation. And then the inboard of that are some shorter tangs, and those wrap around and crimp on the copper wire. And obviously that makes the electrical connection. But equally as important are the ones on the aft tangs, because those are the ones that provide the mechanical support for the wire. And so with every crimp that I make, I pull on it and give it a little wiggle. And so that's what they call a 5-pound pull test. And I'm pulling pretty hard because honestly I don't want it to break, but if it's going to break, I want it to break right now. I want it to break in front of me because I can easily replace it now, much more easily than I can rebuild an airplane because the aileron stopped working. So anyway, I'm going to continue doing this for an hour or so, and I'll bring you back. Okay, well, that didn't take an hour. That took about 10 minutes. So next up, we're going to start populating them. No, we're not. Yeah, it comes back to that planning thing again. Hang on. Okay, so the part the part I forgot about was want to use some seed. That's just not going to work. Okay, so the thing I keep kind of struggling with here is my desire to put some snakeskin onto all these wires. And so I've got 4 wires coming out of the right wing, and I wanted to get some snakeskin on those, and I can tell, you know, what wire is what because I use some different color wire. This is the aileron wire, this is the flap wire, and these are the 2 throttle wires, which look identical, which is why I have tape around one of them, which is telling me that is, don't know, it's number 1. Alright, so I've snugged some snakeskin down onto that. I'm now going to struggle with some snakeskin onto this one as well, just like that. Which, I mean, the stuff opens up, you know, to accept larger bundle and makes it a little easier to push it on. If you pull it on, it gets tighter as you pull, so that's bad. Something is stuck somewhere. Are we moving? There we go. What I should have coming out this end is 3, 6, 9, almost, but not quite. 12, there they are. 12 wires. Alright, and I'm going to snug this all the way down past the point at which I can see that piece of tape. Eventually I'm going to remove that piece of tape, but for now it tells me that is for engine number 4. Okay, good. And then another piece of snakeskin will go onto these 12 wires. This is where things get really interesting because they've already got their pins on them, and the pins are all sharp and pointy and will come right through the snakeskin, which doesn't make my job any easier. Okay, are we good? Are we happy? There we go. Let's see if we can get them all to go. Those male pins that are on these particular wires, you see how they just poke right through. They do not help. They do not help me get the snakeskin in place. Like most males, they are mischievous. grief. Come on. Oh my god, this is so annoying. But once you get the snake skin on, see, look at that. One little peckerwood ruining my success. Come on. Golly. I'm going to have to edit this part of the video. They all come out? They're working on it. Good grief. 3, 6, 9, 12. Okay. Woohoo. Jesus wept. Okay. So that was fun. Alright, and so the missing part here is the giant snakeskin. And so I've got one bundle coming out of the right wing, here, and another bundle coming out of the left wing here. And then those two wires from each bundle are going into a separate 4 servo connector, 12 wire connector. And those are separate bundles. So one snakeskin bundle, 2 snakeskin bundles getting split up into 2 separate snakeskin bundles, and that'll make a little bit of a mess right here in the middle. So kind of like using heat shrink tubing, except I don't want to use heat shrink tubing in this case. I will use this snakeskin to kind of cover and protect the wires, provided I can get it on here without, I don't know, losing my friggin' mind. Just starting to look less and less realistic. Might have to tape them all up in order to get this on here. Come on, baby. Fortunately, this snake skin is large enough. It'll open up. I can get my fingers in there and yank everything through. Alright, now I want to fit this over the existing snakeskin bundles. And just slide it down and get it out of the way. Okay, like that. Piece of cake. Good grief. Alright, so somewhere in this particular bundle is a piece of tape telling me that one of these wires is throttle servo 1. Alright, so I'm going to fish around. Nobody said this was fun or easy or neat and clean and tidy. I didn't say any of those things, did I? No. So it's a little bit of a struggle, and you just got to suck it up. There might be an easier way to do it, in which case, by all means, do it that way. This is that wire right there. So this is number 1. Huh. First choice right out of the block, I get number 1. Okay, so this is all kind of what I was getting down to, is putting these things together. So typically your servo wires go, black, red, white, and so I try and I want to keep that kind of relationship going into this connector as well, and so need to organize them, maybe twist them, put a little bit of twist on them so that they line up together as black, red, white, and the little keeper, clipper, clippy doodad things that are going to snap into place, they are aligned vertically. Is that true? Doesn't help that I have really bad eyes. Okay, they will go into the first three slots of this connector. Just like that. You can't hear it, but I'm listening for a little click sound, and I did not hear it. Just want to get this probe, and I can push on not the wire but the clippy doodad connector part. Still not hearing it. Why? What is the fucking problem? Okay, well, this is embarrassing. This connector that I showed you, I told you I called it an Ashlock connector, which is also known as a Molex connector. Actually has imprinted in the plastic the word amp, which makes it an amp connector, which is a competitor to Molex. Interestingly, this is the mating connector for it. This is a Molex connector, also known as Ashlock, and they made up as well. The little pins that I've been using was from my previous stash. I just bought these from DigiKey, thinking I was buying the same Molex connector that I always buy. Turns out this is an amp connector that I never buy. Not because there's anything wrong with them, but because I've always bought the Molex, and so now I'm very embarrassed. It's the wrong connector, and these pins, which are Molex pins, which I've crimped onto these wires, don't fit into the amp connector. Fortunately, I happen to have some of the Molex connectors, also known as Ashlock, and so I can get back to trying to do what I was doing. But now, once again, with an Ashlock connector, remember I was saying that I want to hear a little clicky sound. There's a very micro, infinitesimal little piece of these pins that kind of angles up, and it snaps up into one of those holes. You can see 12 holes side by side, and it's a keeper. Keeps them from being able to back out. And you want to hear them snap into place. There we go. Okay. So servo number 1, throttle number 1 is in place. Coming out of that same little bag of the same right wing will be throttle number 2. So I got to figure out which one of these wires is from throttle number 2. There it is. Same kind of thing. I want to arrange it so that all the wires are poking up and sitting in the right orientation. Black, red, white. And having said that, I'm looking at my wires in here, and look, there's a problem. I went black, white, red. It's so easy to make a mistake, and it happens all the time. And you just have to keep checking your work. It is so easy to miswire something and blow up a servo. Certainly don't want to do that. So what that means is now the little infinitesimal pokey little thing I told you about, I have to actually push it in on both the red and the white wires, and so that they can be removed and switched. Once they're out, you then have to return that little keeper to its original position. Okay, good fun. Good grief. Okay, so I walked away from it last night because I was pissed off at the fact that these are amp connectors and this is a Molex connector, and I didn't know that, and so but all's well that ends well. this is so this is done. This is the throttle connection, and so that's all nicely done. The snake skin has been zip tied in place, and I haven't zip tied the back end of the snake skin yet, because I still have some mess to clean up here, and also I need to wire up the other 12-pin connector, the other sex, and so I'm gonna get about doing that right now, and then I'll be able to finalize the cleanup of you know, all the snake skin we got going on here. So later. Okay guys, so I thought I'd show you what kind of like the next step is, and I've made up this particular harness. This is the harness that will go inside the fuselage. These four ends here will plug into the receiver, and each one of these ends has a little number on it. This is number 3. This is theoretically all four throttles. So number 1, number 3, that's a little bit messy, but that's a number 4, and a number 2. The idea being that this will help me get these things plugged in properly. And theoretically, those are all tied to these numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are hopefully all tied to, you know, the engines. 1, 2, 3, and 4 all the way down there. And so what I'm about to do is smoke test the whole thing. So we'll plug in a battery here into a little servo controller, and I'm going to plug in servo number 1, and hopefully that engine down there on the right wing, far right wing, will be operable. Oh, I already heard something. Good. Number 2. Good. It's that one right there. Okay. Number 3. This one over here. Inboard left wing. Good. And number 4. Alright. You know what, I gotta tell you, after the kind of trouble I was having last night, I'm actually surprised. I'm surprised they all work. Because, I don't know, I think I pushed it too long yesterday. It's like 12 hours working on it. After having been at work and. So that's how we do it. So this is ready to plug into the fuselage and get routed and zip tied to all of its particular places. So I can set that aside and know that that's done. Yay! Now I just have another one just like that one to make, and that'll be for the ailerons and the flaps. And this will all be done. So I'm gonna. All right. So I'm just finishing up, and so what I've got going on here is, you know, I went ahead and finished up the. This is for the ailerons and the flaps. That's a different sex than the one for the throttles, but they could be mated together like that. You could do that if you wanted to store them that way. No real reason to do that though. Alright, and so I'm just basically completing the tie-up now. So there was a piece of one piece of snakeskin for all the wires coming out of the left wing, and a piece of snakeskin for covering up all the wires coming out of the right wing. That snakeskin has been kind of forced into the tube that goes all the way through the wing, and then was zip tied off. And then there's this piece of snakeskin for the actual aileron and flap connector, servo connector, and I will get it zip tied down. Like so. So that's nice and neat. And then there's this great big piece of snakeskin that goes over the whole mess. Actually, I want to go ahead and I want to put zip ties on. Where are my zip ties? That's good TV right here. It's like dead air. Alright, this big piece of snakeskin that kind of goes over the whole, breakout mess in the middle there, where we're switching over from two bundles coming out of the wings into two different bundles that are going into these connectors. And so we'll just zip all that up. Nice and tight. Just like that. Okay. There you go. That is... So the wing is all wired up now. And this is all you got. When we plug the wing into the fuselage, there are two connectors that cannot be misconnected. They cannot go in backwards. They cannot go into each other's position. That's the beauty of this type of connector. You cannot misconnect your servos, which is important. And then there's this, which is this hooks up all the airlines in the wing. So you should be able to hook up 8 servos and a set of retracts in well under 30 seconds. That's how I do it. So, later.